A quiet black girl walks into Lincoln Heights High, thinking she can survive by staying invisible. But the school's favorite bullies see her as easy prey. The second she steps into the hallway, one shove turns into public humiliation. Racist jokes, viral videos, and a brutal attack behind the classroom walls, all because a group of entitled athletes thought she would never fight back. What they didn't know, Naomi Carter wasn't weak. She was trained to destroy anyone who crossed the line. But when the truth finally comes out, the people who should have protected her are exposed too. Stay until the end. Because the final twist and public downfall will absolutely shock you. And write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? The first Monday morning at Lincoln Heights High School buzzed with the familiar energy of students returning to class after the weekend. Conversations echoed through the wide brick hallways. Lockers slammed shut, and groups of friends laughed as they hurried toward their classrooms. Amid the noisy crowd, 17-year-old Naomi Carter stepped quietly through the front entrance, holding a folder of enrollment papers against her chest and a stack of textbooks tucked securely under one arm. Unlike most students around her, she wore no expensive clothes, no flashy accessories, and no expression that demanded attention. Her calm eyes scanned the unfamiliar hallway, carefully reading the room while searching for her first class. Moving to a new school was never easy. But Naomi reminded herself of the promise she had made to her mother before leaving home: focus on school, stay out of trouble, and never let anger make decisions for you. She had repeated those words countless times during the drive to Lincoln Heights, believing that if she kept her head down, this new beginning might finally give her the peaceful life she wanted. Unfortunately, someone else had already noticed her. Leaning casually against a row of lockers stood Logan Brooks, the star quarterback whose popularity gave him an influence that reached far beyond the football field. Surrounded by several teammates and admirers, Logan had built a reputation that few students dared to challenge. Teachers often overlooked his behavior because of the school's championship ambitions, while many students laughed at his jokes simply to avoid becoming his next target. The moment his eyes landed on Naomi, he smirked. To him, the quiet new girl looked like the perfect opportunity for entertainment. "Who's the new girl?" he asked, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Tyler Mason," always carrying his phone to capture embarrassing moments for social media. Immediately lifted his camera with an eager grin. "Looks like she doesn't even know where she's going." He laughed. Logan pushed himself away from the locker and walked directly toward Naomi, deliberately blocking her path. She politely stepped to one side, hoping to continue without confrontation. But Logan matched her movement, forcing her to stop. For a brief second, their eyes met. Naomi remained calm, refusing to react to the challenge silently placed before her. Without warning, Logan slammed his shoulder into hers. The impact knocked the books from Naomi's arms, scattering notebooks, papers, and folders across the polished hallway floor. The conversations around them abruptly stopped before being replaced by laughter from Logan's friends. Tyler captured every second on his phone, zooming in as loose papers drifted across the corridor. "Guess you should watch where you're going," Logan mocked with a satisfied smile. Even though everyone had seen exactly who caused the collision, Naomi stood still for a moment, taking a slow breath before kneeling to gather her belongings. She ignored the laughter surrounding her, carefully stacking each book without saying a single word. Her silence only encouraged Logan's group, who expected tears, anger, or desperate protests instead. A few students exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing the unfairness of the situation. Yet none dared step forward. Emma Collins watched from nearby, her hands tightening around her backpack straps, She wanted to help. But years of witnessing Logan's cruelty had taught her that anyone who defended his victims often became one themselves. Mr. Harrison emerged from a nearby classroom after hearing the commotion. For a hopeful moment, Naomi believed an adult might finally intervene. Instead, the teacher sighed heavily after glancing at Logan and then at the students gathering around. "That's enough," he said with little conviction. "Everyone get to class." Logan shrugged innocently while Tyler lowered his phone, hiding a smile. Mr. Harrison offered Naomi only a brief glance before turning away without asking what had actually happened. Within seconds, the hallway returned to its usual routine as though nothing serious had occurred. Naomi picked up the last notebook from the floor, brushed the dust from its cover, and quietly continued walking toward her classroom. Behind her, Logan laughed loudly enough for the entire hallway to hear. "Don't get comfortable," he called after her with a grin that sent another wave of laughter through his friends. That was just the welcome. Naomi kept walking without looking back, convincing herself that staying silent was the smartest choice. She believed that if she refused to fight, the bullying would eventually end. She had no idea that this humiliating encounter was only the beginning of a much darker battle waiting for her at Lincoln Heights High School. By the middle of her first week at Lincoln Heights High School, Naomi Carter had already become the student everyone recognized, but almost no one truly knew. She arrived early every morning, kept her eyes on her schedule, and walked the hallways with the same quiet confidence that had confused Logan Brooks since the day they first crossed paths. Most new students would have complained to teachers, called their parents, or reacted emotionally after being humiliated in front of half the school. Naomi did none of those things. She simply focused on getting through each class, believing that patience was stronger than anger. Unfortunately, Logan interpreted her silence as weakness instead of discipline. To him, every calm response was an invitation to push harder. Every time she refused to argue, he became even more determined to break her. Around campus, his reputation continued to shield him. Teachers praised his leadership on the football field. Cheerleaders laughed at his jokes, and younger students stepped out of his way whenever he approached. That sense of untouchable authority convinced him that there would never be consequences for his actions. The bullying quickly became more creative and far more cruel than a simple shove in the hallway. One morning, Naomi finished chemistry class only to discover that her backpack had disappeared from outside the classroom where she had left it during a lab activity. She calmly searched the hallway while several students whispered and pointed toward the second-floor balcony. Looking up, she spotted Tyler Mason standing with Logan and two football players, holding her backpack above his head as if it were a trophy. Tyler laughed while recording the entire scene on his phone, making sure to capture Naomi's reaction. Logan tossed the backpack carelessly from one teammate to another before finally dropping it onto the hallway floor several feet away. Books spilled out once again, drawing another crowd of amused spectators. Naomi quietly walked over, gathered her belongings, and continued toward her next class without saying a word. Logan expected frustration, maybe even tears, but instead he received nothing except silence. That silence irritated him more than any insult could have. Lunch became another opportunity for public humiliation. Naomi carried her tray through the crowded cafeteria, carefully searching for an empty table. Before she could sit down, Logan deliberately backed into her path. The collision sent her lunch crashing onto the floor, food splattering across her shoes and the cafeteria tiles. Tyler instantly lifted his phone to record while several cheerleaders burst into laughter. One of them sarcastically apologized before walking away with a smirk, pretending the accident had been Naomi's fault. Conversations throughout the cafeteria slowed as students watched to see how the new girl would react. Emma Collins sat only a few tables away, gripping her fork so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She hated everything she was seeing. More than once, she nearly stood up to help Naomi collect the scattered tray. But every time she looked toward Logan, fear stopped her. She had witnessed other students defend victims before, only to become targets themselves within days. Emma lowered her eyes, ashamed of her own hesitation, while Naomi quietly cleaned the mess herself, without demanding sympathy from anyone. As the days passed, the attacks became even more personal. Logan's group began mocking Naomi's appearance and making cruel remarks about her skin color whenever she walked through the hallways. Tyler edited short clips of each incident, adding sarcastic captions before posting them on the school's private social media page. Every notification brought another wave of laughter, comments, and shared posts. Students who had never even spoken to Naomi suddenly recognized her face because of the humiliating videos circulating across campus. Yet something unexpected continued to happen. Every clip ended the same way. Naomi never cried. She never yelled. She never begged anyone to stop. Instead, she looked directly toward Tyler's phone for a brief moment, before calmly walking away. She knew perfectly well that every insult, every shove, and every cruel joke was being recorded. She simply refused to give them the emotional breakdown they desperately wanted. Her composure wasn't accidental, it was a choice. One shaped by years of discipline and self-control. Logan couldn't understand it. The more he watched the videos afterward, the more frustrated he became. Instead of making Naomi look weak, the recordings slowly began making his own behavior appear increasingly childish and cruel. Emma noticed the same thing. While many students laughed because everyone else did, she started paying closer attention to Naomi's expressions. There was no fear in her eyes, only remarkable patience. It was almost as if she had trained herself to remain calm under pressure. Emma found herself wondering who Naomi really was and why someone so composed had chosen never to fight back. More than once she considered walking over to introduce herself. But the constant presence of Logan's group made every opportunity disappear before she could gather enough courage. Deep inside, guilt continued growing heavier with every passing day. She knew staying silent was wrong. Yet fear remained stronger than her conscience. Meanwhile, Logan's frustration reached a breaking point. Standing outside the gym after school, he replayed Tyler's latest video and threw his hands into the air. "She's making us look stupid," he snapped. Tyler frowned in confusion. "She's not even doing anything." Logan's jaw tightened as he stared across the parking lot, where Naomi quietly walked home alone. "Exactly," he muttered. "She's supposed to crack by now." After several seconds of silence, a slow smile spread across his face as a new idea formed in his mind. This time, he wouldn't settle for embarrassing her in a hallway or cafeteria. He wanted the entire school to witness something unforgettable. Looking toward his friends, Logan spoke with absolute confidence. "By tomorrow," he declared, "I'm going to make sure she never wants to come back to this school again." His words sent excited laughter through the group as they immediately began discussing a plan for the biggest public humiliation Lincoln Heights High School had ever seen. The next afternoon seemed unusually quiet, a sharp contrast to the tension that had followed Naomi Carter throughout her first week at Lincoln Heights High School. Classes had just ended, and students poured into the hallways, eager to leave campus before the weekend. Naomi packed her notebooks into her backpack and noticed something immediately felt wrong. The small notebook she always carried, a worn journal filled with class schedules and personal notes, was missing. She searched inside her bag twice before a familiar voice echoed from the doorway. "Looking for this?" Logan Brooks asked with a smug grin, holding the notebook between two fingers. Tyler Mason stood beside him, with his phone already in his hand, while three other football players leaned casually against the lockers. Exchanging knowing smiles, Naomi took a slow breath before walking toward them. "Please give it back," she said calmly. Logan pretended to consider her request before shrugging. "Sure. Meet us behind Building B. We left the rest of your stuff there." His tone sounded almost friendly, but the laughter from his friends revealed the trap hidden beneath the invitation. Naomi hesitated for only a second. She knew Logan rarely did anything without an audience, and every instinct warned her to walk away. Yet she also knew the notebook contained important information she couldn't simply replace. Without another word, she turned and headed toward the old classroom wing behind Building B. The area behind the abandoned classrooms was one of the quietest places on campus. Years earlier, the building had been partially closed for renovation, leaving only a narrow walkway between aging brick walls and a chain-link fence that separated the school grounds from the athletic fields. Very few students came there unless they had a reason. As Naomi rounded the corner, she immediately spotted Logan's group waiting for her. Her notebook rested on top of a concrete bench only a few feet behind them, placed just far enough away to force her into their circle. Tyler casually leaned against the wall, unlocking his phone before opening the camera application. The familiar recording icon appeared on the screen, unnoticed by everyone except Naomi. She glanced briefly at the phone, then shifted her attention back to Logan without changing her expression. "I came for my notebook," she said quietly. "Nothing else." Logan chuckled as if she had told a joke. "Relax," he replied. "We're just having a conversation." His teammates slowly spread out until they surrounded her from every direction, cutting off the narrow path leading back toward the main campus. Before Naomi could reach the bench, one of the boys stepped forward and grabbed the strap of her backpack. Another quickly snatched it away, tossing it toward a teammate who caught it with exaggerated excitement. Within seconds, her belongings became the center of another cruel game as the boys threw the backpack back and forth over her head while laughing loudly. Tyler circled around them, recording every angle like a filmmaker documenting a carefully planned performance. "Come on," he laughed. "At least try to catch it." Logan folded his arms, enjoying every second of the humiliation. "You wanted your stuff back," he said. "Earn it." Naomi remained exactly where she stood. Her breathing stayed slow and controlled despite the insults echoing around her. She watched each movement carefully, saying nothing until the backpack landed in Logan's hands once again. "Gimme me bag," she repeated, her voice calm but firm. Logan shook his head. "Or what?" The other boys laughed even louder, expecting the quiet girl to finally explode in anger. Instead, Naomi surprised them with something they had never expected. She took one small step backward, creating a little more space between herself and the group. Her posture remained relaxed, her shoulders loose, and her hands stayed open at her sides. She looked directly at Logan before speaking in a voice that carried no fear, only quiet confidence. "I don't want to fight anyone," she said. "Give me my backpack, and I'll leave." Tyler zoomed in with his phone, hoping to capture the moment she finally broke down. Logan smirked. "Nobody's fighting," he replied sarcastically. "We're just having fun." One of the boys shoved Naomi lightly on the shoulder to provoke a reaction, but she barely moved. "I'm asking you one more time," she answered. "Please stop." Her words were not a plea born from weakness, but a genuine warning offered out of restraint. Years of martial arts training had taught her that avoiding violence was always the first victory. Unfortunately, Logan mistook her patience for surrender. Every warning she gave only convinced him that she would never defend herself. What none of them realized was that a small security camera mounted beneath the roofline of the abandoned building overlooked the entire walkway. Months earlier, rumors had spread across campus, claiming the camera had stopped working after construction began. Students frequently ignored it, assuming it had become nothing more than an unused piece of equipment. Logan believed the same rumor without question. Tyler never even bothered to glance toward it as he continued recording on his phone. Naomi noticed the camera almost immediately after arriving, although she had no idea whether it still functioned. Its silent presence reminded her that actions always left evidence somewhere. She chose every word carefully, making sure anyone watching would understand. She had repeatedly tried to avoid conflict. "This is your last chance," she said quietly. "Give me my things, and let me walk away." For a brief moment, an uneasy silence settled over the group. Even Tyler lowered his phone slightly, surprised by how composed she remained. Logan, however, refused to back down, feeling his authority slipping away in front of his friends. He decided it was time to end the game his own way. A cruel smile slowly spread across his face as he tossed Naomi's backpack onto the ground behind her. The distraction worked perfectly. The instant she instinctively glanced toward the fallen bag, Logan gave an almost invisible nod to one of his teammates standing directly behind her. Without warning, the boy lunged forward and swung his leg with all his strength, aiming a vicious kick at Naomi's back. In the split second before impact, time seemed to freeze. Tyler's phone captured every frame. The silent security camera overlooked the entire scene, and Naomi sensed the sudden movement just as the attack came crashing toward her. That single kick would become the moment that changed every life involved, and nothing at Lincoln Heights High School would ever be the same again. The powerful kick slammed into Naomi Carter's upper back with enough force to send an ordinary person crashing face first onto the concrete walkway. For a split second, her body leaned forward from the impact, and the group surrounding her erupted in laughter, convinced they had finally succeeded. But instead of falling, Naomi instinctively shifted her weight onto her front foot, planting it firmly against the ground. Years of disciplined martial arts training took over before conscious thought could catch up. She lowered her center of gravity, absorbed the force, and regained her balance in one smooth movement that seemed almost effortless. The laughter faded almost immediately. Logan Brooks narrowed his eyes, surprised that she had remained standing. Even Tyler Mason lowered his phone for an instant, confused by what he had just witnessed. Naomi slowly turned around to face them. There was no anger on her face, no fear, and no desire for revenge. Her breathing remained calm and controlled as she looked from one student to another before stopping on Logan. "I've asked you politely more than once," she said in a steady voice. "I'm asking one last time. Let me leave." The narrow passage behind Building B fell strangely quiet. For the first time since Naomi had arrived at Lincoln Heights High School, nobody laughed. Logan hated the silence. More than anything, he hated the fact that everyone was now staring at Naomi instead of him. The reaction he had spent days trying to provoke had turned into something entirely different. Instead of looking broken, the quiet new student appeared composed, almost impossible to intimidate. Logan felt his pride slipping away in front of his friends, and that humiliation ignited his temper. He stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. "You think you're tough now?" he sneered. Naomi never changed her stance. Her hands remained open at her sides, her shoulders relaxed, her posture balanced but non-threatening. "I don't want to fight you," she answered. "Walk away." Logan laughed loudly, hoping to recover the confidence he had just lost, or what he challenged before throwing the first punch directly toward her face. The movement was fast but reckless. fueled by anger instead of control. Naomi reacted almost instantly. She shifted half a step to the side, allowing Logan's fist to pass harmlessly through the empty space where she had been standing only a fraction of a second earlier. Using the momentum of his missed strike, she gently caught his wrist, turned her hips, and redirected his balance without striking him. Logan stumbled forward and landed hard on one knee, staring at the ground in complete disbelief. Naomi immediately released his arm and stepped back again instead of following with another attack. "Stop," she warned. "This doesn't have to continue." Her restraint only embarrassed Logan further. Behind him, one of the football players rushed forward, shouting as he swung both arms wildly. Naomi remained calm. She slipped outside the attack, avoided the clumsy punch with a slight turn of her shoulders, and used a simple arm control technique to guide the student's own momentum past her. Unable to stop himself, the boy stumbled over his own feet and crashed onto the pavement beside Logan. Another teammate charged almost immediately, trying to tackle her around the waist. Naomi pivoted smoothly, placed one hand against his shoulder, and redirected his movement until he lost balance and rolled harmlessly onto the ground. Every motion was economical, precise, and completely defensive. She never chased anyone. She never struck after they had fallen. Every technique ended the moment the immediate threat disappeared. The students had expected an angry fight filled with wild punches. Instead, they watched someone who seemed determined not to hurt anyone, unless absolutely necessary. Tyler continued filming almost automatically, too shocked to lower his phone. Through the screen, he captured every warning Naomi had given, every attack initiated by Logan's group, and every controlled response that followed. The more he recorded, the more uncomfortable he became. Logan's frustration exploded into desperation. He scrambled back to his feet, ignoring the pain in his bruised knee. "Get her," he shouted. The remaining boys hesitated for only a second before rushing toward Naomi together. For the first time, she realized there was no peaceful way to leave. They had ignored every warning she had offered. As the group closed in, Naomi moved with remarkable precision. She sidestepped one attacker, blocked another without striking his face, and used controlled joint locks to force each aggressor off balance before releasing them the moment they stopped attacking. Within seconds, the narrow walkway was filled with groans as Logan's friends struggled to get back on their feet, more embarrassed than seriously injured. Naomi herself remained almost untouched. She stood several steps away from the group, breathing steadily, her expression unchanged, despite everything that had happened. "I told you I didn't want this," she said quietly. "You left me no choice." An uneasy silence settled over the abandoned walkway. Tyler finally lowered his phone, staring at the screen with growing disbelief. His hands trembled slightly as he replayed the recording from the beginning. Every important detail was there. Logan deliberately luring Naomi behind Building B, the backpack being stolen, Naomi repeatedly asking to leave peacefully, the kick from behind, Logan throwing the very first punch. Every second proved that Naomi had acted only after being attacked, and that every move she made was purely self-defense. Tyler swallowed hard. The video he had intended to use for another humiliating post had become evidence that could destroy Logan's version of events completely. For the first time since they had started bullying Naomi, Tyler felt genuine fear, not of Naomi, but of what the truth might do if anyone else saw the footage. Logan noticed Tyler's expression almost immediately. Limping toward him, he snatched a quick glance at the phone screen and realized exactly what had been captured. The color drained from his face before being replaced by cold determination. He couldn't allow that recording to reach teachers, parents, or the school administration. If it did, everything he had built, his reputation, his place on the football team, and the special treatment he enjoyed could disappear overnight. Looking at Tyler with an intensity that left no room for argument, Logan spoke in a low, controlled voice. "Nobody sees that video," he said. "Do you understand me?" Tyler looked down at the phone once more, torn between fear and conscience. Before he could answer, Logan was already planning how to twist the story, blame Naomi for everything, and make sure the truth never escaped the walls of Lincoln Heights High School. The atmosphere inside Principal Rebecca Grant's office was far colder than the afternoon air outside. Naomi Carter sat quietly in a chair near the window, her backpack resting beside her feet, while Logan Brooks occupied the seat across from her with a fresh bandage wrapped around his wrist. Anyone walking into the room without knowing the truth would have assumed Logan was the victim. Coach Daniels stood beside him with his arms crossed, his expression filled with disappointment that seemed directed entirely at Naomi. Mr. Harrison leaned silently against the wall, avoiding eye contact with either student, while Principal Grant reviewed several handwritten incident reports spread across her desk. The room remained silent until Logan finally broke it with a dramatic sigh. "She attacked us," he said firmly. "We were just trying to give her back her notebook. And she completely lost control." His voice sounded calm and rehearsed, as though he had repeated the story several times before entering the office. Coach Daniels nodded immediately. "Logan has represented this school with honor for years," he added. "I've never known him to start a fight. We can't ignore something this serious." Naomi listened without interrupting. When Principal Grant finally turned toward her, she spoke in the same calm tone she had maintained since arriving at Lincoln Heights. "That's not what happened," she answered. "I asked them several times to let me leave. I only defended myself after they attacked me." Principal Grant folded her hands together and studied Naomi carefully. "Do you have any witnesses willing to support your version?" she asked. Naomi hesitated. She remembered Tyler recording everything from beginning to end. The video had captured every warning she gave, the kick from behind, and Logan throwing the first punch. Tyler Mason recorded the entire incident. She replied, "His phone has the truth." For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed Logan's face before he quickly recovered. Coach Daniels immediately dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. "A football player isn't going to lie for no reason," he argued. "Besides, kids record everything these days. That doesn't prove anything." Moments later, Tyler was called into the office. The moment he stepped inside, Logan met his eyes for less than a second. It wasn't a threat spoken aloud, but Tyler understood exactly what it meant. Years of friendship, loyalty, and fear weighed heavily on his mind. Principal Grant asked him a simple question. "Do you still have the recording?" Tyler slowly reached into his pocket and unlocked his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen as guilt tightened in his chest. The video was still there, waiting to reveal everything exactly as it had happened. But he also knew what exposing Logan would cost him. He would lose his closest friends, his place in their group, and perhaps become the next target himself. Swallowing hard, Tyler looked down one final time before pressing the delete button. The screen asked him to confirm the action. After several painful seconds, he selected delete permanently. Then he looked back at the principal and quietly said, "I'm sorry. I erased it after school. I needed storage space." Naomi stared at him in disbelief. She said nothing, but the disappointment in her eyes spoke louder than any accusation ever could. The room suddenly felt even heavier. Without the recording, Naomi's explanation became one student's word against several others. Coach Daniels immediately seized the opportunity. This is exactly why discipline matters, he insisted. If students believe they can attack members of the football team without consequences, we'll destroy everything we've built here. Mr. Harrison remained silent, remembering the hallway incidents he had ignored earlier that week. Yet he still found no courage to challenge the narrative unfolding before him. Principal Grant rubbed her temples, clearly frustrated by the lack of clear evidence. At this point, she finally said, "I can't determine exactly what happened behind Building B." She paused before continuing with a decision that made Naomi's heart sink. "Until the investigation is complete, Naomi Carter will be placed on temporary suspension effective immediately." The words echoed through the office like a final verdict. Naomi lowered her eyes for a brief moment before quietly standing. She wanted to argue, to explain once again that she had only protected herself. But she realized no one in the room was truly listening anymore. Logan hid a satisfied smile, convinced his plan had worked perfectly. As Naomi picked up her backpack and walked toward the door, Principal Grant added one final sentence that carried even greater weight than the suspension itself. "Depending on what we discover next," she said, "the school board may have to consider permanent disciplinary action." Naomi stopped for only a second before continuing into the hallway. For the first time since arriving at Lincoln Heights High School, she realized she was no longer fighting only against a group of bullies. She was now facing the very real possibility of being expelled for a fight she had never wanted and never started. Emma Collins barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Naomi Carter standing alone behind Building B returned to her mind with painful clarity. She remembered the calm warnings Naomi had given, the fear she had hidden so well, and the look of disbelief on her face when Tyler admitted he had deleted the recording. What haunted Emma even more was her own silence. She had witnessed Logan Brooks terrorize students for years, always convincing herself that staying out of trouble was the safest choice. But watching an innocent girl suspended for defending herself pushed that excuse beyond its breaking point. By the following morning, guilt had become stronger than fear. If no one stepped forward now, Naomi could lose everything because of a lie. Emma took a deep breath before skipping her first class and heading toward the administrative wing. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she refused to stand by any longer while the truth disappeared. The security office sat at the end of a quiet hallway few students ever visited. Inside, rows of surveillance monitors displayed live images from every corner of Lincoln Heights High School. Mr. Reynolds, the veteran campus security officer, looked up from his desk in surprise as Emma knocked gently on the open door. "You're supposed to be in class," he said with a polite smile. Emma hesitated before gathering enough courage to speak. "I need your help," she replied. "The fight behind Building B yesterday. Everyone says there wasn't any proof, but I think one of the cameras might have recorded it." Mr. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, clearly surprised by her question. "The old camera," he asked. "Most students think it's broken." Emma nodded quickly. "Is it?" The officer smiled faintly and turned toward the wall of monitors. "No, it still works perfectly. We never removed it after construction was delayed." Hearing those words made Emma's heart race. She had hoped the camera existed, but she never expected it to have captured everything. Mr. Reynolds typed a few commands into the computer before opening the archived footage from the previous afternoon. Seconds later, the video appeared on the monitor. Emma watched in stunned silence. The recording showed every moment with remarkable clarity. Logan lured Naomi behind Building B under the false promise of returning her notebook. His friends surrounded her, stole her backpack, laughed at her, and ignored every calm request to let her leave. Then came the vicious kick from behind. followed by Logan, throwing the very first punch. Naomi never attacked anyone unnecessarily. Every movement she made afterward was measured, defensive, and carefully controlled. She used only enough force to protect herself before stepping back again. There was no doubt about what had happened. The security footage completely destroyed the story Logan had told in the principal's office. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes, not because of the fight itself, but because the truth had been sitting quietly inside the school's computer system, while Naomi was suspended for something she had never done. "This proves everything," Emma whispered. "Mr. Reynolds nodded slowly. "It certainly changes the investigation." Before Emma could celebrate, Mr. Reynolds' expression suddenly became serious. He pointed toward a small notice displayed in the corner of the computer screen. "There's one problem," he explained. "Our surveillance system automatically overwrites footage after 24 hours unless someone archives it manually." Emma immediately checked the time. Less than 3 hours remained before the recording would disappear forever. "Can you save it?" she asked urgently. Mr. Reynolds reached into a cabinet and removed a portable hard drive. "Yes," he replied. "I'll make a copy right now. Then deliver it directly to Principal Grant." As the transfer began, Emma finally allowed herself to believe Naomi still had a chance. She watched the progress bar slowly move across the screen, every percentage bringing them one step closer to proving the truth. At that very moment, however, trouble was already moving toward them. Across campus, Tyler Mason sat alone outside the gym. Unable to shake the guilt of deleting the video from his phone, Logan noticed his unusual silence and demanded to know what was wrong. Under pressure, Tyler admitted that Emma had been asking questions about the incident and seemed convinced another recording existed somewhere. Logan's expression immediately changed. "The security cameras," he muttered. His confidence vanished almost instantly as he remembered the old camera mounted behind Building B. He had dismissed it as broken without ever checking. Realizing what that footage could mean, Logan hurried toward the administrative building with 2 teammates close behind. If the recording reached Principal Grant, every lie he had told would collapse. Inside the security office, the copying process finally reached 100%. Mr. Reynolds disconnected the hard drive and placed it into Emma's hands. "Take this straight to the principal," he instructed. "I'll stay here and prepare the original files." Before Emma could answer, loud footsteps echoed through the hallway outside. Logan's angry voice grew louder with every second. "Open the door," he shouted. Emma froze. Mr. Reynolds looked toward the entrance, immediately realizing what was happening. "Go," he said firmly. "Use the back exit." Without wasting another second, Emma clutched the hard drive tightly against her chest and sprinted through the rear doorway of the security office. Behind her, Logan burst through the front entrance just as she disappeared down the service corridor. His eyes locked onto the empty doorway, and he instantly understood that the evidence was slipping away. Emma raced through the narrow hallway, her heartbeat pounding in her ears with every step. The struggle had become far bigger than school bullying or popularity. It was now a desperate race between truth and deception, and whoever reached Principal Grant first would decide Naomi Carter's future. The disciplinary hearing began under an atmosphere of heavy silence that seemed to settle over every corner of the conference room. Principal Rebecca Grant sat at the center of the long table, accompanied by several members of the school's disciplinary committee. Naomi Carter occupied a single chair opposite them, her hands folded neatly in her lap, despite the uncertainty surrounding her future. She had spent the previous night wondering whether she would ever return to Lincoln Heights High School as a student. Across the room, Logan Brooks appeared far more confident, wearing the school football jacket that had become a symbol of his status. He leaned comfortably against his chair, convinced the meeting would simply confirm what everyone already believed, that Naomi had violently attacked him and his teammates. Tyler Mason avoided looking at either of them. Unable to escape the guilt that had followed him since deleting the video from his phone, the room remained quiet until Principal Grant cleared her throat and announced that new evidence had been submitted only minutes before the hearing. Logan's confident smile faded ever so slightly, while Naomi looked up in surprise, unsure what evidence could possibly still exist. Before anyone could ask another question, the conference room door opened, and Emma Collins stepped inside. Breathing heavily from having hurried across campus, clutched tightly in her hands was the portable hard drive she had protected from the security office. Every eye turned toward her as she walked directly to the principal's desk. "I believe this belongs in today's hearing," she said, placing the drive carefully on the table. Principal Grant looked at her with curiosity before glancing toward Mr. Reynolds, who had followed Emma into the room. The security officer nodded confidently. "This contains the surveillance footage recorded behind Building B yesterday afternoon," he explained. "The camera everyone believed was broken has actually been operating the entire time." The words struck the room like a bolt of lightning. Logan's shoulders stiffened almost instantly. Tyler lowered his head, already knowing exactly what the footage contained. Without wasting another moment, Principal Grant connected the hard drive to the conference room computer. The large monitor at the front of the room flickered to life as the recording began to play. No one spoke while the video unfolded. The footage revealed every detail with remarkable clarity. Logan was seen holding Naomi's notebook before deliberately leading her behind the abandoned classrooms. His friends surrounded her, blocking every possible exit while Tyler recorded with his phone. The committee watched as Naomi repeatedly asked for her belongings and calmly requested permission to leave. Her voice remained steady throughout the encounter, showing no aggression whatsoever. Then the moment everyone had argued about finally appeared. One of Logan's teammates delivered the vicious kick into Naomi's back without warning. Seconds later, Logan himself threw the very first punch. Only after both attacks did Naomi defend herself. Even then, every movement demonstrated extraordinary restraint. She never chased anyone after they fell, never struck a student already on the ground, and repeatedly stepped backward whenever there was an opportunity to end the confrontation peacefully. By the time the recording reached its conclusion, the silence inside the conference room had become almost unbearable. The truth no longer depended on opinions or conflicting statements. It was displayed before everyone in undeniable detail. Principal Grant slowly paused the video and turned toward Naomi. For the first time since the investigation had begun, her expression softened with genuine regret. "Miss Carter," she said quietly, "the committee now recognizes that your actions were entirely consistent with self-defense. You repeatedly attempted to avoid violence, and every physical response occurred only after you were attacked." Naomi simply nodded. She had spent days trying to explain exactly that, yet hearing those words brought little satisfaction. The damage had already been done. She had been suspended, publicly blamed, and forced to defend her character because almost everyone had chosen to believe the more popular student. Across the room, Logan's confidence completely collapsed. His breathing became noticeably faster as every lie he had carefully constructed unraveled within minutes. "That video doesn't show everything," he argued desperately. "She knew what she was doing. She wanted us to hit her." Even as the words left his mouth, they sounded hollow. No one responded. The evidence on the screen spoke far louder than any excuse he could invent. The committee members began asking Logan direct questions about the inconsistencies in his original statement. Why had he claimed Naomi attacked first? Why had multiple students surrounded her behind an isolated building? Why had he failed to mention the kick from behind? Logan stumbled through one explanation after another, each contradicting the previous answer. Sweat formed across his forehead as the confidence that once defined him disappeared completely. Tyler finally looked up from his chair, unable to tolerate the deception any longer. In a trembling voice, he admitted that he had recorded the entire incident himself, but deleted the video because he was afraid of Logan. The confession hung in the air like another devastating blow. Logan turned sharply toward his friend, his face filled with disbelief and anger. But Tyler refused to lower his eyes this time. Months of fear had finally given way to honesty. Principal Grant closed the folder containing the disciplinary reports and slowly stood from her chair. Based on the surveillance footage and the testimony presented today, she announced, Naomi Carter's suspension is lifted immediately, and all disciplinary action against her is withdrawn. Naomi released a quiet breath she had been holding since entering the room. But the principal was not finished. She looked directly at Logan before addressing the entire committee. What we've witnessed today raises questions far beyond a single fight. There are serious concerns regarding bullying, false statements, witness intimidation, and possible failures in staff supervision. Her voice became firmer with every sentence. Effective immediately. I am ordering a comprehensive investigation into every allegation involving Mr. Logan Brooks, and anyone who may have enabled this pattern of behavior. The room fell silent once again. Logan stared at the table, realizing the hearing he believed would protect him had instead become the beginning of something far more dangerous. As Naomi quietly left the conference room beside Emma, neither of them realized that uncovering the truth about one afternoon behind Building B was only the first step. The deeper investigators looked into Logan's past, the more hidden secrets they were about to uncover. And those discoveries would shake Lincoln Heights High School to its very foundation. By the following Monday, Lincoln Heights High School felt like an entirely different place. The surveillance footage shown during the disciplinary hearing had spread through whispered conversations long before the administration released an official statement. Students who had once laughed at Logan Brooks' jokes now avoided making eye contact with him in the hallways. Others replayed the story in small groups between classes, struggling to reconcile the school's celebrated football captain with the person revealed in the security video. Naomi Carter returned to campus without fanfare. She walked through the same front entrance, where her books had once been scattered across the floor, carrying herself with the same quiet confidence that had never changed despite everything she had endured. This time, however, the atmosphere around her was different. Instead of mocking smiles and sarcastic comments, she noticed students stepping aside to let her pass. A few even offered polite greetings. Naomi acknowledged them with a simple nod before continuing toward class. She had never wanted attention, sympathy, or revenge. She only wanted the truth to be known. Yet as the truth spread across campus, something unexpected began happening. Students who had remained silent for years slowly found the courage to speak. The administration encouraged anyone with information about previous bullying incidents to come forward, believing Naomi's case might not have been an isolated event. At first, only one student appeared outside the counseling office. Then another arrived before lunch. By the end of the day, several more had quietly joined the growing line. Some carried written statements. Others simply wanted someone to listen for the first time. Their stories shared an unsettling pattern. One sophomore admitted Logan had repeatedly shoved him into lockers during freshman year because he refused to complete homework assignments for the football team. Another student described having her science project destroyed after she reported one of Logan's teammates for cheating. A quiet freshman recalled eating lunch alone for weeks because Tyler Mason had posted humiliating videos that encouraged other students to avoid him. Every testimony revealed another piece of a much larger problem that had existed unnoticed or perhaps deliberately ignored for years. Teachers who attended the interviews gradually realized they recognized many of the names being mentioned. Looking back, they remembered complaints dismissed as harmless teasing, unexplained absences, declining grades, and students who had unexpectedly transferred to other schools. Individually, each incident had seemed insignificant. Together, they painted the picture of a culture that had allowed intimidation to flourish behind a shield of popularity and athletic success. As more victims shared their experiences, uncomfortable conversations spread among the faculty. Mr. Harrison sat quietly during one staff meeting, unable to ignore the growing weight of his own memories. He remembered watching Logan mock younger students in the hallway and convincing himself that teenage conflicts usually resolved themselves. He recalled seeing Naomi's books scattered across the floor during her first morning at Lincoln Heights and choosing to end the disturbance instead of investigating who had actually caused it. At the time, his decisions had seemed practical, avoiding paperwork and keeping the school day moving smoothly. Now they felt like failures. Other teachers reached similar conclusions. Some admitted they had overlooked inappropriate behavior because Logan consistently represented the school at athletic competitions. Others confessed they had underestimated the emotional damage caused by repeated humiliation. Believing students simply needed to become tougher, Principal Rebecca Grant listened carefully as these admissions emerged. Recognizing that the school's greatest mistake had not been one incorrect disciplinary decision, but a pattern of small compromises repeated over many years. Every ignored complaint, every overlooked warning, and every excuse offered for talented athletes had quietly strengthened the environment that allowed bullying to continue. Naomi never attended those meetings, nor did she seek recognition for exposing the truth. Instead, she focused on catching up with missed assignments and rebuilding the routine she had hoped to establish when she first transferred to Lincoln Heights. Emma Collins often joined her during lunch, their friendship growing naturally through shared honesty rather than dramatic conversations. Emma apologized more than once for remaining silent in the beginning, but Naomi never blamed her. She understood how fear could silence even good people. Standing up is difficult, Naomi told her one afternoon. The important thing is that you finally did. Those simple words spread quietly through the student body as Emma began encouraging others to share their own experiences without shame. Little by little, the atmosphere of fear that Logan had maintained for years started to weaken. Students who once avoided speaking against him now realized they were not alone. Every new testimony inspired another victim to step forward, creating a chain reaction that no one had expected. Just when the investigation appeared to have gathered all the evidence it needed, another surprising development pushed the case even further. During an after-school meeting with administrators, a nervous junior named Daniel Foster raised his hand from the back of the room. He hesitated before pulling out an old smartphone with a cracked screen. "I think you should see something," he said quietly. Principal Grant looked at him with curiosity as he unlocked the device. Daniel explained that he had spent years saving videos instead of deleting them because he never trusted the school's response to bullying complaints. Hidden inside the phone were multiple recordings taken over the previous 2 years, clips showing students being shoved into lockers, backpacks thrown across hallways, cruel insults shouted during lunch, and Logan's group laughing while humiliating younger classmates. None of the videos alone revealed the full story, but together they formed a disturbing timeline that stretched back much farther than anyone had imagined. The room fell completely silent as Daniel handed the phone to the principal. What had begun as an investigation into one fight behind Building B was rapidly transforming into a comprehensive record of systematic bullying that could no longer be dismissed as isolated incidents. With every recovered video, every written statement, and every witness willing to speak. The chain of evidence grew stronger, bringing investigators closer to uncovering the full truth about what had been happening at Lincoln Heights High School for years. The emergency parent meeting held 3 nights later filled the Lincoln Heights High School auditorium beyond capacity. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the polished floor. But even those were not enough to accommodate the crowd that continued pouring through the doors. Parents stood along the walls, arms crossed tightly, while anxious conversations echoed throughout the room before the meeting officially began. News of the surveillance footage, the bullying investigation, and the growing collection of old videos had spread far beyond the school campus. What initially seemed like a single fight between students had now become a public controversy involving favoritism, ignored complaints, and years of unchecked intimidation connected to the football program. Many parents arrived angry. Others arrived worried that their own children might have suffered in silence without anyone noticing. At the front of the auditorium, Principal Rebecca Grant sat behind a long table beside several administrators and Coach Daniels, whose usually confident posture looked noticeably tense for the first time in years. The meeting began with a brief statement from Principal Grant, summarizing the investigation. She acknowledged that Naomi Carter had acted in self-defense and confirmed that the school had reopened multiple prior complaints involving Logan Brooks and several students connected to the football team. The moment she finished speaking, hands shot into the air across the auditorium. One father stood before being recognized, his frustration obvious. "How long has this been happening?" he demanded loudly. "Because my son transferred schools last year after being harassed by those boys. And nobody here did anything." Murmurs of agreement spread immediately through the crowd. Another parent rose seconds later, holding printed screenshots from old social media posts. "These videos were online for months," she said angrily. "Students were humiliating each other publicly, while teachers walked past like nothing was wrong." The atmosphere inside the room grew heavier with every accusation. Parents who had once proudly supported the football program now questioned whether athletic success had become more important than student safety. Coach Daniels attempted to regain control of the discussion before the situation escalated further. Leaning toward the microphone, he spoke with forced calm. "I understand everyone's concerns," he began. "But we should be careful about condemning an entire team because of a few mistakes made by individual students." His words immediately triggered another wave of outrage. A mother seated near the front stood abruptly from her chair. "Mistakes," she repeated sharply. "Students were bullied for years while adults ignored it. That's not a mistake. That's negligence." Applause erupted throughout the auditorium. Coach Daniels tightened his jaw, but tried once more to defend himself. He insisted that coaches could not monitor every student interaction outside practice, and argued that many accusations were only becoming public now because emotions were running high after Naomi's incident. However, every explanation only deepened the frustration in the room. Parents began listing examples of special treatment athletes received missed assignments, excused without consequences, disciplinary reports quietly dismissed, and complaints minimized whenever football players were involved. One father revealed that his daughter stopped attending pep rallies entirely after being mocked repeatedly by Logan's group. Yet no teacher had ever followed up despite multiple reports. As the criticism intensified, Coach Daniels gradually lost the confidence that had protected him for years. Sweat formed across his forehead, while parents demanded direct answers about why warning signs had been ignored for so long. Some questioned whether winning championships had become more important to the school than protecting vulnerable students. Others pointed toward a deeper issue: adults in positions of authority, choosing convenience over responsibility. Principal Grant listened carefully as each parent spoke, occasionally glancing toward the growing stack of written complaints collected by administrators during the investigation. For the first time, She fully understood how many families had quietly lost trust in the school system long before Naomi Carter ever arrived at Lincoln Heights. The problem was no longer limited to one bully or one violent confrontation. It had become a failure of leadership. Near the back of the auditorium, Naomi sat quietly beside Emma Collins. Both nearly invisible among the crowd of parents and teachers, Naomi had not wanted to attend the meeting. But Emma convinced her that hearing the truth spoken publicly mattered. As the arguments continued around them, Naomi noticed something she had not expected. People were no longer debating whether the bullying existed. They were demanding accountability from the adults who had allowed it to continue. For the first time since arriving at Lincoln Heights, Naomi no longer felt isolated. The silence protecting Logan and his group was finally breaking apart. After nearly 2 hours of heated discussion, Principal Grant slowly stood from her chair once more. The auditorium gradually fell silent as she looked across the crowd with a seriousness that commanded attention. This investigation has revealed failures that extend beyond student behavior. She said firmly, "We cannot claim to protect our students while ignoring repeated warning signs simply because certain individuals bring prestige to the school." Her eyes briefly shifted toward Coach Daniels before returning to the audience. "Effective immediately. This investigation will include any staff member, faculty member, or administrator who may have enabled, ignored, or concealed acts of bullying and intimidation." A stunned silence followed her announcement. Even Coach Daniels appeared momentarily speechless. Principal Grant continued without hesitation. "Accountability does not stop with students. Adults who failed to act will also face consequences." The significance of her words settled heavily across the auditorium. Parents exchanged stunned glances as the reality of the situation became clear. The investigation was no longer centered solely on Logan Brooks and his friends. Teachers, coaches, and administrators who had ignored complaints or protected certain students from consequences could now face disciplinary action themselves. As the meeting finally came to an end, small groups of parents remained in the aisles discussing what might happen next. Coach Daniels left the auditorium quickly, without speaking to reporters waiting outside, while Principal Grant stayed behind answering difficult questions from concerned families. Meanwhile, Naomi quietly exited through a side door with Emma beside her. The battle that began behind Building B had evolved into something much larger than either of them imagined. Students were not the only ones being judged anymore. At Lincoln Heights High School, the adults who had chosen silence were finally being forced to answer for it. The atmosphere inside the Lincoln Heights High School auditorium felt completely different from the tense chaos of the parent meeting several days earlier. This time, the room was filled with anticipation rather than outrage. Students, teachers, parents, and faculty members occupied nearly every seat as whispers spread through the crowd about the disciplinary decisions that were about to be announced. At the front of the stage, Principal Rebecca Grant stood behind the podium with several members of the school board seated nearby. Coach Daniels sat several feet away, his expression grim and exhausted, while Logan Brooks remained unusually quiet in the front row beside Tyler Mason and the other students involved in the incident behind Building B. Gone was the confidence that once followed Logan through every hallway in the school. The investigation had stripped away the protection his popularity once provided. Leaving him to face consequences no amount of athletic success could erase. Near the middle of the auditorium, Naomi Carter sat beside Emma Collins. Unlike everyone else in the room, Naomi appeared calm. She had never wanted revenge against anyone. She only wanted the truth acknowledged. Principal Grant stepped toward the microphone as the room slowly fell silent. "Over the past 2 weeks," she began, "Lincoln Heights High School has conducted a comprehensive investigation into allegations of bullying, harassment, intimidation, and staff misconduct connected to recent events on campus. Her voice carried clearly through the auditorium. The investigation included surveillance footage, student testimonies, archived social media recordings, faculty interviews, and disciplinary records dating back several years. The seriousness in her tone immediately captured everyone's attention. She paused briefly before continuing. The evidence revealed a long-standing pattern of bullying behavior carried out by multiple students and enabled by repeated failures in supervision and accountability. Several parents exchanged uneasy glances while students lowered their eyes toward the floor. No one could deny the truth anymore. The first disciplinary decisions came quickly. Logan Brooks and the students directly involved in the attack behind Building B received long-term suspension for physical assault, harassment, intimidation, and providing false statements during an official school investigation. In addition, each student was permanently removed from all athletic programs and extracurricular leadership positions. A heavy silence spread across the auditorium as the announcement settled in. Logan stared ahead without speaking, his jaw tightening while whispers moved through the crowd around him. Tyler looked equally shaken, though his expression carried more guilt than anger. Principal Grant then addressed the adults involved. Coach Daniels was suspended indefinitely, pending further review for knowingly dismissing repeated reports of misconduct involving members of the football team. Mr. Harrison received formal disciplinary action and mandatory retraining after investigators concluded that he had repeatedly ignored warning signs of student harassment. Hearing teachers and coaches publicly disciplined shocked many students more than the punishment given to Logan himself. For years, authority figures had seemed untouchable. Now, for the first time, the administration openly admitted that adults had failed alongside the students they were supposed to guide. Finally, Principal Grant turned her attention toward Naomi Carter. The entire auditorium seemed to grow quieter as she spoke. After reviewing all available evidence, this administration formally recognizes that Naomi Carter acted entirely in self-defense and was wrongfully suspended during the initial stages of the investigation. Naomi remained still as dozens of eyes shifted toward her. On behalf of Lincoln Heights High School, Principal Grant continued. I offer our sincere apology for the failures that allowed this situation to occur. A small wave of applause began somewhere near the back of the auditorium before gradually spreading across the room. Naomi acknowledged it only with a slight nod. The recognition mattered, but it could not erase everything that had happened during her first weeks at the school. As the meeting began to conclude, Logan unexpectedly stood from his chair. The movement immediately drew everyone's attention. For several seconds, he looked toward Naomi as though struggling to find the right words. The confident athlete who once controlled entire hallways now appeared uncertain and exposed. He started quietly before swallowing hard. I'm sorry for what happened. The apology sounded forced, incomplete, and painfully shallow, as if spoken more because consequences demanded it than because he fully understood the damage he caused. Naomi studied him silently for a moment before finally standing as well. The auditorium remained completely still, waiting for her response. Forgiveness isn't just words, she said calmly. Real forgiveness has to come with change. Her voice was neither angry nor cruel. It carried the quiet honesty that had defined her from the very beginning. Logan lowered his eyes, unable to answer. Those words lingered in the auditorium long after the meeting officially ended. Students slowly filed toward the exits while teachers gathered in small groups discussing everything that had happened over the past several weeks. Some believed the punishments were overdue. Others quietly wondered how many similar situations had gone unnoticed in previous years. Meanwhile, Naomi and Emma walked side by side through the crowded hallway toward the front entrance of the school. Outside, The late afternoon sunlight stretched across the campus that had once felt openly hostile only days earlier. Yet despite the investigation, the suspensions, and the public apologies, Naomi understood something important. The story was not truly over. Removing a few students from the football team would not instantly erase years of fear, silence, and misplaced priorities. Real change would take far more than punishment alone. As Lincoln Heights High School slowly confronted the consequences of its failures, a much larger transformation was only beginning. Several weeks passed after the disciplinary hearings, yet the atmosphere at Lincoln Heights High School continued changing in ways few people could have imagined before Naomi Carter arrived. The tension that once filled the hallways had slowly been replaced by something unfamiliar: awareness. Students no longer laughed automatically when someone became the target of humiliation. Teachers paid closer attention to the quiet corners of campus they once ignored. Conversations about bullying, accountability, and respect became part of everyday life instead of uncomfortable topics avoided whenever possible. The scars left by the investigation had not disappeared, but they forced the school community to confront truths that had been buried for years. Naomi, however, never sought recognition for the changes happening around her. She continued focusing on her studies with the same calm discipline that had carried her through the worst moments of her first semester. The difference now was that she no longer walked through the school alone. One afternoon after classes ended, Naomi stepped inside the school's small martial arts club for the first time since returning to campus. The club had existed quietly for years, but rarely attracted much attention beyond a handful of dedicated students. After learning about Naomi's training and the restraint she showed behind Building B, the faculty advisor invited her to help teach basic self-defense techniques. Naomi hesitated at first. She never wanted students to associate martial arts with revenge or violence. But after speaking with several younger students who admitted they constantly felt unsafe at school, she agreed to help. Under one condition: every lesson would focus on protection, discipline, and avoiding conflict whenever possible. The club quickly grew larger each week. Students practiced simple techniques for escaping grabs, maintaining balance, and protecting personal space. But Naomi spent just as much time teaching confidence and emotional control. The goal isn't to hurt anyone, she reminded them during every session. The goal is to protect yourself and walk away safely. Watching students grow more confident without becoming aggressive gave Naomi something she had not expected to find at Lincoln Heights: a sense of purpose. At the same time, Emma Collins emerged as one of the strongest voices for change across campus. The guilt she once carried for staying silent transformed into determination after the investigation ended. Working closely with school counselors and administrators, Emma helped launch a student-led anti-bullying campaign called Stand Together. Posters appeared throughout the hallways, encouraging students to report harassment instead of ignoring it. Anonymous reporting boxes were installed near the counseling office, and peer support groups began meeting weekly after school. More importantly, students themselves slowly started changing. When arguments broke out in the cafeteria, classmates stepped in before situations escalated. Cruel videos stopped spreading through school social media pages because students refused to share them. Even small acts of kindness, inviting isolated classmates to sit together at lunch or checking on students after difficult days, began reshaping the culture that once protected intimidation and silence. One rainy Monday morning near the end of the semester, Naomi stood near the front entrance speaking with Emma before class when they noticed a new student walking nervously through the doors. The girl looked younger than most students around her, clutching a backpack tightly against her chest while anxiously scanning the crowded hallway. Several months earlier, Naomi recognized exactly what would have happened next. Students might have laughed at her uncertainty, whispered cruel comments, or searched for ways to embarrass someone vulnerable. But this time, something different happened. Before the girl could take another uncertain step, two students from Naomi's self-defense club approached with friendly smiles and offered to help her find her classroom. Nearby, Emma noticed another student quietly stopping a group of boys who had started making sarcastic remarks. The hallway continued moving around them, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Naomi watched the nervous girl relax slightly as she walked away with her new guides. And for the first time since arriving at Lincoln Heights High School, she allowed herself a small smile. The school still had a long way to go, but the cycle of silence had finally begun to break. Lincoln Heights High School had learned its lesson the hard way. For years, silence, fear, and favoritism allowed cruelty to grow unchecked behind smiling faces and championship trophies. It took one quiet girl refusing to surrender her dignity for the truth to finally come into the light. The scars left behind would not disappear overnight, but neither would the changes that followed. Students now understood that looking away could be just as harmful as bullying itself. Teachers realized that small warning signs should never be ignored, and for the first time in a long time, people who once felt powerless finally believed their voices mattered. The school was still rebuilding, still learning, and still facing the consequences of its failures, but it was no longer the same place Naomi Carter had walked into on her first day. This time, when injustice appeared, there were people willing to stand up instead of staying silent. The final week of the school year arrived with warm sunlight stretching across the campus of Lincoln Heights High School, transforming the atmosphere that had once been filled with tension and fear into something calmer and more hopeful. Rows of white chairs covered the football field as students, teachers, and families gathered for the annual end-of-year ceremony. Banners celebrating academic achievements fluttered in the afternoon breeze while the school band prepared quietly near the stage. Months earlier, few people could have imagined such a peaceful scene after everything that had happened during the semester. The investigation into bullying had changed the school permanently. New student protection policies had been introduced. Anonymous reporting systems were now active, and teachers received additional training focused on recognizing warning signs that had once been ignored. More importantly, students themselves had begun creating a culture where silence no longer protected cruelty. Conversations that once happened only in whispers were now discussed openly. Lincoln Heights was still healing, but it was finally moving in the right direction. Backstage near the gym entrance, Naomi Carter adjusted the sleeves of her simple navy blue graduation outfit while listening to the distant sound of students filling the stadium seats. She still felt uncomfortable being the center of attention. Ever since the disciplinary hearings months earlier, many students viewed her as a symbol of courage. But Naomi never considered herself a hero. In her mind, she had simply done what anyone should do when faced with injustice: remain calm, protect yourself, and refuse to become cruel in return. Emma Collins stood beside her, holding a folder filled with notes for the anti-bullying campaign that would continue next year. Their friendship had become one of the strongest reminders of how much the school had changed. "You nervous?" Emma asked with a smile. Naomi let out a quiet laugh. "A little," she admitted. "I'd rather face another sparring match than speak in front of the entire school." Emma shook her head playfully. "That's because speaking honestly is harder." As the ceremony began, Principal Rebecca Grant stepped onto the stage beneath a wave of polite applause. Unlike previous years, her speech carried none of the rehearsed confidence often heard at school events. This time, her words felt personal. Looking across the crowded field, she paused for a moment before addressing the audience with complete honesty. "This school year forced all of us to confront difficult truths," she began. "We discovered that success, reputation, and tradition mean nothing if students do not feel safe, respected, and heard. The stadium grew completely silent. Parents listened carefully, while teachers exchanged thoughtful glances. Principal Grant openly acknowledged the mistakes made by the administration and admitted that warning signs had been ignored for too long. She then announced several permanent policy changes, including stronger anti-bullying protections, mandatory intervention training for faculty members, expanded counseling support, and the creation of student leadership programs focused on peer accountability. Lincoln Heights cannot erase the failures of the past, she continued, but we can decide what kind of school we become moving forward. Then came the moment many students had been waiting for. Principal Grant invited Naomi Carter onto the stage to receive a special recognition award for courage, restraint, and leadership under pressure. As Naomi walked across the platform, the entire stadium rose to its feet in applause. Yet what made the moment powerful was not admiration for her fighting ability. Students were not cheering because she knew martial arts. They were honoring the calm strength she displayed when humiliation, fear, and injustice surrounded her. Principal Grant handed Naomi the award before speaking quietly into the microphone. What impressed this school most was not your ability to defend yourself, she said. It was your refusal to abuse that strength when anger would have made it easy. Naomi looked out across the crowd and saw faces that had once watched silently from the hallways, now applauding with genuine respect. For the first time since arriving at Lincoln Heights, she truly felt accepted. Just as Naomi prepared to leave the stage, movement near the side entrance drew the audience's attention. Logan Brooks stepped slowly into view. A murmur spread across the stadium almost immediately. Since his suspension, very few students had seen him on campus. Gone was the arrogance that once followed him through every hallway. He wore no football jacket, no expression of superiority, only visible nervousness as he approached the microphone after receiving permission from Principal Grant. For several long seconds, he struggled to speak. I spent a long time blaming everyone except myself, he finally admitted. His voice sounded quieter than anyone remembered. I thought being popular meant I could do whatever I wanted without consequences. The crowd remained silent as Logan looked briefly toward Naomi before continuing. I hurt people because I liked feeling powerful. And when someone finally stood up to me, I lied because I was afraid of losing everything. Tyler Mason lowered his head from the audience while several former teammates stared at the ground. Logan took a slow breath before speaking again. Naomi, I'm truly sorry. Not just for the fight, but for everything that happened before it. This time, his apology carried none of the emptiness from the earlier disciplinary hearing. The shame in his voice felt genuine, because he finally understood the damage his actions caused. Naomi studied him quietly for a moment before giving a small nod of acknowledgement. She did not need a dramatic speech or public revenge. Growth mattered more than humiliation. As Logan stepped away from the microphone, the tension that once divided the school seemed to ease just slightly. The ceremony continued beneath the warm evening sky, but the emotional center of the day had already passed. By the time the event finally ended, students gathered around the stage, laughing, taking photos, and celebrating the close of a school year none of them would ever forget. When Naomi walked off the stage one final time, applause echoed throughout the stadium once again. But the reason people admired her had nothing to do with throwing opponents to the ground or mastering self-defense techniques. What stayed in their minds was something far more important despite every insult, every humiliation, and every opportunity to strike back in anger. Naomi used her strength only when she had no other choice. In a school that once confused fear with power, she taught everyone a lesson they would carry long after graduation. True strength is not measured by the ability to defeat others, It is measured by the ability to remain calm under pressure. Protect yourself without losing your humanity, and stand against injustice, even when standing alone feels impossible. Sometimes the people who look the strongest are actually the ones hiding behind fear, power, and silence. Naomi never wanted revenge, attention, or violence. She only wanted respect and the chance to live without being humiliated. But in the end, her calmness exposed an entire system that protected bullying for far too long. This story reminds us that real courage is not about hurting others. It's about standing up when everyone else stays silent. If you were in Naomi's position, would you have stayed calm like she did? Or would you have fought back much earlier? Let us know down in the comments. And if this story kept you hooked until the very end, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about justice, courage, and unforgettable karma.